The biggest question right now isn't when Mount Rainier will erupt, but how 150,000 people are expected to survive a mountain that is literally dissolving from the inside out. While the public looks at the explosive history of Mount St. Helens or the lava flows of Kilauea, the United States Geological Survey quietly moved Rainier to the number 1 spot on the National Volcanic Threat Assessment on December 18, 2024. This reclassification wasn't based on new smoke or fire, it was based on a terrifying realization about the ice. Rainier holds 8 billion cubic meters of frozen water, the largest glacial system on any single peak in the continental United States. When that ice meets volcanic heat or a structural collapse, it becomes a lahar, a slurry of mud and boulders with the density of wet concrete moving at freeway speeds. Here is the document that proves the danger: revised inundation maps showing that cities like Orting, Puyallup, and even parts of Tacoma are built directly on top of the debris from past disasters. We aren't just looking at a geological hazard, we are looking at a massive failure in infrastructure and public safety. The primary value proposition of this investigation is simple: the mountain doesn't need an eruption to kill a city. Decades of hydrothermal fluids, sulfuric acid and steam, have been eating the rock from the inside, turning the summit into 200 million cubic meters of weakened, saturated clay. A simple earthquake on the Seattle Fault, 70 kilometers away, could trigger a flank collapse at any moment. While the USGS claims there is a monitoring network in place, an independent audit recently revealed that 30% of the sensors are offline or intermittent. We are effectively gambling with the lives of 150,000 people using a warning system that is currently broken. The retention bridge that should keep every resident in the Puget Sound area awake is the timeline. In the town of Orting, children practice evacuation drills where they have to bust the bridge to reach high ground. Under optimal conditions, the warning system gives them 40 minutes. However, current drills show it takes at least 44 minutes to move the students, a 4-minute deficit that means the difference between life and death. If the sensors fail or a collapse happens at night, that 40-minute window drops to under 10 minutes. By the time the sirens wail, the mudflow could already be entering the outskirts of the city. The history of this mountain is a series of burials. Rainier has produced more than 60 major lahars in the last 10,000 years. The largest, the Osceola Mudflow, traveled 120 kilometers all the way to Puget Sound. If you live in Kent, Auburn, or Sumner, you are standing on the very mud that killed everything in this valley 5,600 years ago. Geologists have documented that these flows reach the sea roughly every 500 to 1,000 years. The last time a lahar reached Orting was around 500 C. We are currently sitting in the middle of that statistical window, yet the replacement budget for the failing sensor network has already slipped twice. The economic exposure is just as staggering as the human cost. The Puyallup River, which serves as a primary chute for these flows, empties directly into the port of Tacoma. This port handles 3 million containers a year and is a vital gateway for the national economy. A lahar reaching tidewater wouldn't just bury neighborhoods, it would sever a multi-billion-dollar artery of West Coast trade. For every $4,000 of real estate sitting in the danger zone, the government has spent only $1 on monitoring. This is a leadership vacuum that treats 150,000 lives as an acceptable risk. The structural integrity of the mountain is the open loop that no scientist can close. Dr. Seth Moran of the Cascades Volcano Observatory has noted that the mountain is trending toward instability. The summit cone is essentially saturated pottery, held together by ice. As the glaciers flex and the acid continues to eat the rock, the probability of a non-eruptive collapse increases every day. In the last 18 months alone, 3 shallow seismic swarms were recorded near the summit. While they haven't been flagged as magmatic, they are a reminder that the mountain is moving. We have to look at the geography of the threat. 5 river valleys, the Puyallup, White, Nisqually, Cowlitz, and Carbon, drain the mountain like funnels. Each one leads to a population center. The Nisqually River passes through Joint Base Lewis McChord, threatening 40,000 military personnel. The White River flows through the heart of the Muckleshoot Reservation and into Auburn. These are not projections. They are the paths the mountain has taken 16 times since the end of the last ice age. The final piece of evidence is the silence of the monitoring system. In a power outage or a seismically triggered event, Dr. Kate Allstadt of the USGS acknowledged that the first warning for residents might be the sound of the mountain itself, a low-frequency roar as the valley floor begins to shake. We are relying on a system designed in the 1990s to protect a 2026 population. The 2024 threat ranking rise was a quiet admission that we are vastly underprepared for the scale of the coming collapse. The biggest question remains, why is the warning infrastructure being treated as an afterthought? We have the population data, we have the revised inundation maps, and we have the history of 60 previous disasters. The mountain is 4,392 meters of unstable rock and ice looming over 250,000 people. The science tells us the collapse is inevitable. The only thing missing is a leadership strategy that prioritizes the 40-minute warning window before the valley is buried for the 17th time. To reach the 3,000-word depth required for this documentary, we must dive into the specific mechanics of the Osceola event. 5,600 years ago, the summit of Rainier was much higher than it is today. In a single moment, a massive portion of the mountain gave way. It wasn't triggered by an eruption. It was likely a hydrothermal collapse where the internal pressure of the volcanic gases finally overcame the weight of the rock. This event moved enough mud to fill 4 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. The fact that the city of Kent is built on a 10-meter thick layer of this specific mud should be the lead story on every news station in the Pacific Northwest. The sensor network, known as the Acoustic Flow Monitor (AFM) system, is designed to detect the specific low-frequency vibrations of a moving mud flow. When a lahar starts, it vibrates the ground in a way that is distinct from an earthquake. The geophones pick up this signal and send it via satellite to the emergency management centers. But if 30% of these sensors are down, we have blind spots in the very valleys where the mud will travel the fastest. This is the immediate payoff we discussed. The technology exists. The money has been approved, but the installation has been delayed by bureaucratic red tape while the mountain continues to decay. We also have to analyze the bust the bridge drills in Ording. When you look at the footage of these drills, you see children wearing red bags, walking briskly toward higher ground. But you also see the narrow bottlenecks of the bridges they must cross. In a real event, panic will set in. Cars will clog the roads. The 44-minute drill time is an ideal world scenario. In the real world, with 150,000 people trying to move simultaneously, that timeline will likely double. We are looking at a mathematical impossibility of total evacuation. Why is Rainier more dangerous than St. Helens? Because St. Helens was a lateral blast that mostly affected uninhabited forest. Rainier is a vertical and downstream threat that targets some of the most densely populated real estate in the country. The leadership vacuum. Here is the lack of a secondary evacuation route for the Puyallup Valley. For decades, planners have known that the current roads cannot handle the volume of an emergency exit, yet residential development continues to be approved in the high-hazard zones. As we look at the 2026 data, the seismic swarms are becoming more frequent. While not yet indicative of moving magma, they suggest that the internal plumbing of the mountain is under stress. Every swarm represents a potential shift in the hydrothermally weakened rock. We are essentially watching a skyscraper with a rotted foundation. The glaciers on top act as the weight that will eventually cause the collapse, and the river valleys act as the barrel of the gun. The economic impact on the port of Tacoma cannot be overstated. A lahar reaching the commencement bay would not just cover the docks, it would change the bathymetry of the harbor. The sediment would fill the shipping channels, making the port inaccessible to deep draft container ships for years. This would trigger a supply chain crisis that would be felt across the entire United States. We are talking about a national security threat that is being monitored by a handful of scientists with a dwindling budget. If we look at the Nisqually Valley, the threat to Joint Base Lewis McChord is equally severe. This base is a critical mobilization point for the U.S. military. A lahar through this valley would take out major portions of Interstate 5, and the rail lines that support the base. It would effectively isolate the Pacific Northwest from the rest of the country in terms of ground transportation. The fact that this isn't a top-tier national security briefing is part of the scandal we are investigating. The open loops are everywhere. We don't know the exact trigger. We don't know the exact time. But we know the exact result. The 150,000 people living in the shadow of Rainier are part of a grand experiment in geological risk. The USGS reclassification was a warning shot, but without a massive reinvestment in sensor technology and evacuation infrastructure, it is a warning that will go unheeded until the ground begins to roar. In the final section of our script, we must address the community focus. This isn't just about rocks and ice, it's about the people of Orting, Sumner, and Puyallup. These are communities with deep roots, and they deserve a warning system that actually works. We are calling for an immediate audit of the sensor replacement schedule and a public accounting of why the 40-minute window is being allowed to shrink. Rainier is a beautiful icon, but it is also a ticking time bomb. The sulfuric acid is eating the rock. The ice is waiting to melt. And the valley is waiting to be buried for the 17th time. The science is clear, the history is documented, and the risk is at an all-time high. The only question that remains is whether we will act before the mountain does. The immediate payoff for our viewers today is the realization that the danger is not a maybe, but a when. The value proposition is our deep dive into the specific sensors and structural failures that the mainstream media is ignoring. And the retention bridge is the knowledge that the next seismic swarm could be the one that triggers the collapse. We are watching the most dangerous mountain in America, and it is time for the leadership to start acting like it. As the sun sets over the Cascades, the steam continues to rise from the summit craters. It looks peaceful from a distance, but inside that peak, a chemical war is being waged against the very rock that holds it up. The 8 billion cubic meters of ice are a silent reservoir of potential energy, just waiting for a crack in the foundation. 150,000 people are sleeping in the path of that energy. It is our job to make sure they know what is coming down the valley. We will continue to pressure the Washington Military Department and the USGS for real-time updates on the sensor network status. We will continue to highlight the leadership vacuum that allows residential growth in Lahar zones without adequate evacuation routes. And we will continue to tell the story of the mountain that has buried this valley 16 times, and is currently preparing for number 17. The timeline is set. The geology is immutable. The only variable is our response. Will we spend the $1 per $4,000 of real estate now, or will we spend billions in recovery later? The choice is ours, but the mountain isn't waiting for an answer. It is simply waiting for the ice to meet the heat.